Welcome to the motherfucking relay where we're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, well, this is grabbing a lot of headlines. Bob Arum had this to say. He said Joshua damaged his credibility. Fury is viewed as the #1 guy in the United States. He was quoted as saying, "In the United States, if you ask people who the #1 heavyweight is, I think many people will say Tyson Fury." Arum said to BBC Radio 5 Live's Boxing with Costello and Bunce. He needs to really desperately come to fight in the United States. And I say that not because I'm an American. I say that because economically, the U.S. market is still the most important because the pay-per-view in the United States has the potential of 200 million to 150 million homes. Bob Arum is a very old fucking guy. And these old guys, they don't got no problem telling you how they feel about some shit. They don't make no bones about telling you the truth of what they feel.
What they feel.
But the thing is, the truth of what you feel may not align with the truth overall. Bob Arum went as far as saying that Anthony Joshua is fighting of what he calls no-hopers.
Damn.
Quote unquote.
It's a bit harsh.
He said Joshua fighting no-hopers in the UK has hurt his credibility. And what we're gonna do, which is what we always do on this channel, what we're gonna do is we're gonna look at what he's saying and cross-compare that with the reality of things. Is what Bob Arum is saying here, does that align with the truth, with reality? Because, you know, this is the relay. This is Ring IQ. We don't just believe some shit or run with some shit based on who said it. We look at who's saying it, why they're saying it, and cross-compare that with the facts. So here's a fact. Whether you think Anthony Joshua's quality of competition consists of no-hopers, like Bob Arum does, whether you don't think much of the people that Anthony Joshua has been fighting, or you do think much of those guys, here's the reality. Regardless of what you think, whether you think they're good fighters, bad fighters, or no-hopers like Bob Arum, regardless of what you think, the guys that Anthony Joshua has been keeping busy with, fight by fight, are in fact top 10 contenders. And we're not just talking about the WBC's top 10 or the WBA's or the WBO's or the IBF's. No, in the division by division rankings, Anthony Joshua has been keeping busy with nothing short of top 10 contenders. And this is a guy that only has 22 professional fights. Not damn near 40 like Wilder. And even Tyson Fury, he's got more fights than Anthony Joshua.
28.
Yet the guy with the least amount of fights just so happens to hold the most amount of belts and face the most amount of top 10 contenders. That is simply a matter of fact. It's not subject to my opinion, it's not subject to your opinion, and it's not subject to Bob Arum's opinion. That whether Bob Arum thinks those fighters were good fighters or bad fighters, what those fighters actually were top 10 contenders, undefeated champions, one ATG in Vladimir Klitschko.
I'm lying.
In 22 professional fights, Anthony Joshua has fought 2 undefeated champions, several top contenders, and 2 former gold medalists, Olympic gold medalists, Vladimir and Alexander Povetkin. That's the reality of it. And this is a guy that only has 22 professional fights. What you gotta ask yourself is, okay, if you're gonna be that critical of a guy who only has 22 professional fights, obviously you don't like the people that he's been fighting. That's what it sounds like. Okay, I can accept that. But if you're gonna be that critical of him,
are you always like that?
I'm wondering, what do you think of Deontay Wilder's first 22 opponents?
No-hopers?
What do you think of those guys? Can you even name who this guy was fighting at 22-0? Who was he fighting?
Who is that guy?
What do you think of Tyson Fury's first 22 opponents?
What do you think?
When you hold those guys' first 22 opponents side by side with Anthony Joshua's first 22 opponents, don't you notice that Anthony Joshua's first 22 opponents consist of champions, top contenders, former Olympic gold medalists? So if you're going to be that critical of who he's been fighting over there in the UK,
if those are no-hopers,
you would then have to admit that the quality of Wilder's competition at 22-0 and the quality of competition when it comes to Fury at 22-0, it really pales in comparison, because neither one of them were unified champions
this soon,
pay-per-view attractions
this early,
who fought 2 Olympic gold medalists and became national icons. Neither one of them achieved that level of success at only 22-0.
Did they?
So, you know, I really can't qualify Bob Arum's statement when it comes to this particular subject. I can't qualify it. I can't say that I agree that those guys that Joshua's been fighting are no-hopers. No, you know what they are? They're top 10 contenders. They're former champions or undefeated champions in some instances. These are guys that come from the same kind of Olympic pedigree that Joshua does. So calling them, quote-unquote, no hopers, that's a very short-sighted comment to make, and that's not a comment that I can agree with.
Sorry, Bob.
I'm telling you guys, you got to remember what channel this is and where you are. This is the relay. We don't run with some shit just because so-and-so said it. We look at what so-and-so is saying, we analyze why he would be saying that, and then we cross-compare that with the facts, with the truth. And if the shit don't line up,
I'm pointing it out.
then I'm gonna call a spade a spade. That's what I do. I mean, think about it. Bob Arum is calling the guys that Anthony Joshua fought in the UK no hopers. No hopers. No hopers, you say. So Joseph Parker, that guy, he was a no hoper, right? I mean, I know that at the time he fought Anthony Joshua, he was undefeated. I also know that he was the reigning WBO champion. But Bob Arum says that those guys Joshua's been fighting in the UK, those guys are no hopers. Well, Anthony Joshua fought Joseph Parker in the UK.
That guy.
The guy you're calling a no-hoper.
Remember?
The same guy who you decided to co-promote in America, no less, in 2016. Oh, now he's a no-hoper. This is what I mean. Look, younger guys than Bob Arum have very short memories when it comes to the sport of boxing. So for a guy who's like 80-something years old,
He's old!
all these different talking points, all these different factoids, maybe it's more than old Bob can keep up with. It's possible. Because, I mean, he did decide to co-promote Joseph Parker in America in 2016. That's not my opinion. That's a matter of fact. And I hardly think that he would have decided to go ahead with a situation like that if he felt that Parker was really a no-hoper. Maybe from where Bob is sitting, Anthony Joshua is not necessarily really capitalizing on all his earning potential. Because if you're that big in the UK, then coming over to America would only add to what you've already done. Maybe from where he's sitting, it seems that way. And there is some truth in that. That if you did that good over there, just imagine how much money you can add to your bank account by also cornering the American market. Yeah, you'd make a lot more money.
With both.
But rest assured that in terms of fighting, what, no hopers in the UK? No, that's not true. Those guys was top 10 fighters. That's what they were. That's the reality of it. So calling them no hopers, I can't qualify that. The second thing, let's address the pay-per-view angle. The 150 to 200 million homes that Bob Arum thinks that Anthony Joshua is missing out on.
Okay.
You know, earlier today, the news broke that Pacquiao and Adrian Broner's pay-per-view, the pay-per-view they just had this past weekend, that pay-per-view is tracking somewhere at about 400,000 buys. Now that's good, especially in this market, because in this market, it's a million or well over a million motherfuckers that are willing to steal your fight. It's a lot of motherfuckers out here that really don't want to pay for shit. But
It did okay.
the pay-per-view is tracking at about 400,000 buys. Now that's better than Wilder and Fury did with their pay-per-view, but it's not that much better. It's only, you know, the difference between where this pay-per-view is tracking and where that one is tracking is only about 75,000 buys. Essentially, that's only 75,000 homes. 75,000 more homes. And Manny Pacquiao is in many ways twice the megastar that Anthony Joshua is. We know that Manny Pacquiao's been at it a lot longer than Anthony Joshua. We know that Manny Pacquiao is far more decorated than Anthony Joshua. More well-known, more beloved, you name it. Manny Pacquiao is in many ways a bigger star than Anthony Joshua. But in America, in the American market, his fight with Adrian Broner, who has his own kind of popularity, a guy that everybody knows, not everybody likes him, but everybody does know him. Those two guys put together in this market were only able to move about 400,000 buys. That's not a slight at them. I'm not trying to diminish either of them. I'm just stating the facts that in this market, the one that the one that Bob Arum is trying to brag about, 150 to 200 million homes.
Where were they?
This pay-per-view involving two of the most popular fighters in the sport of boxing, it didn't even break 1 million. So while you guys, Bob, and a lot of Anthony Joshua's critics, while these guys are always sitting around bragging about the American market, how good is the market when the likes of Manny Pacquiao and Adrian Broner can't even crack or come close to 1 million pay-per-view buys? I mean, not even 1 million. They didn't
600,000?
come close to 600,000, which is kind of what I was expecting. I was kind of expecting something between 500 and 600,000 buys. Wasn't actually expecting it to do 1 million. But this pay-per-view is tracking at less than that. And this is with two very big names. Two names that are known not just amongst hardcore boxing fans, but casuals too. And the most they did in this market is 400,000 buys and counting. And you think Anthony Joshua is hurting his credibility by not prioritizing this market, the market where that fight only does that amount of pay-per-view buys? Let me tell you something. In the UK, Anthony Joshua don't need a big name. He don't need to conjure up a Tyson Fury or a Deontay Wilder to move 1 million pay-per-view buys. Now, of course, there is a discrepancy in what the pay-per-view costs. Pay-per-view over there is something like something like $25 a fight, whereas here it's about $75 to $80. But that's the point. That the price point in America actually deters more customers than it brings in. Whereas a more affordable price point in the UK results in more pay-per-view buys. Why? Because more people can afford them. So you end up making more money overall than trying to price gouge your customers by charging them $75 a fight. You're gonna find more people that are willing to pay $25 for a pay-per-view than guys that want to pay $75 for one. And if the likes of a Manny Pacquiao and an Adrian Broner can only move 400,000 buys in America, what do you think would happen if Joshua tried to sell one here? These guys are always telling you that the Wilder versus Joshua fight in America is a $100 million fight, yet time and time again, the pay-per-view buys, involving other pay-per-views, they tell another story. That is not a $100 million fight. It's not, I'm sorry. You're talking about 150 million to 200 million homes. That's what Bob Arum is talking about. The amount of homes, the size of the market in America. 150 million to 200 million homes. But out of that 150 million to 200 million homes, not even a million bought this fight between Pacquiao and Broner. And they're more popular than Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, and Deontay Wilder. They didn't move a million. Wilder and Fury, they moved even less than that. So constantly reiterating the size, the number of homes in this country, that's not gonna take away from the truth. And the truth is, the price point in America is so high that it deters more customers than it brings in. And as a result of that, very popular guys, they're not doing the kind of numbers that you would think they would have done. And until that price point changes, this is only going to continue. And in fact, it may get worse. Look at how many people stole Wilder's fight. Wasn't it like a reported 2 million illegal streams in America alone? That's not counting another million in the UK and several other millions across the planet, okay? If the price point in America don't change, it's only going to get that much harder to sell pay-per-views here. Whereas Anthony Joshua has managed to become a pay-per-view attraction that regularly moves either a million or close to it in pay-per-view buys in his own backyard. And that's because the price point over there is a lot cheaper. But better still, you do end up making more money because more people, that many more people, are willing to buy it. Ask yourself a question. If Anthony Joshua had fought the likes of Alexander Povetkin, who he fought in his last fight, that fight moved about 1.1 million pay-per-view buys domestically in the UK. Had he fought Alexander Povetkin here in America, do you think it would have moved a million pay-per-view buys?
Hell
no. No. Of course not. Anthony Joshua is not a draw here, and Povetkin is even less of a draw. So you got you have no chance of moving that kind of a number, thus generating that kind of revenue between a guy who's not a draw and a guy who's even less of a draw than that guy. But over there in the UK, that was a big fight. A lot of people showed up. A lot of people bought the fight. A lot of people enjoyed it over there in the UK. So the real thing here is, it's what I've been saying for a very long time, and those of you that follow this channel will have already heard this, but I'll reiterate it for any of the new subscribers that might be out there. It's not that there's no incentive to come to America. You can come here and try to build a base here as well. But
you don't have to.
That really wouldn't be coming from a need so much as a want. Anthony Joshua does not need to come to America to make money. And not coming to America, that doesn't hurt his credibility. That's just basic fucking economics. If Manny Pacquiao can't move a million buys here, what fucking chance do I have? They know him more than they know me. So I'm not gonna fucking prioritize going over there and potentially flopping when I'm making millions upon millions upon millions of dollars here in my own backyard. And I don't gotta go nowhere. I ain't gotta get on nobody's plane to make millions upon millions of dollars. Whereas if I go over there, I'm running the risk of not making the same money. At some point, I expect to see Anthony Joshua fighting in America. Not from a need, but from a want. Because he may want to capitalize on this market. He may want to
try it out.
See how well he can do here in the States to add that to what he's already built over there in the UK. But I reiterate, that would be coming from a want, not a need.
You don't need it.
Because if the American market were everything that Bob Arum and many others make it out to be, Deontay Wilder would be the pay-per-view star. Fuck's sake, he's been around longer than Anthony Joshua. His fights get shown here regularly, right? Yet this guy just had his first pay-per-view and it only did 325,000 buys. To make matters worse, you had to conjure up Tyson Fury and give him half of the purse.
To sell it.
Also, you could move 325,000 buys.
That's it?
In a market that consists of 150 million to 200 million homes? That's not very encouraging, fellas. This is basic economics. And the entire premise for this conversation, having to come to the American market and attempting to appeal to it for financial gain, this conversation often happens in the improper context. Many people romanticize
this concept,
having to come to America, and view it as a rite of passage as opposed to the actual reason that fighters do it. I get that in some ways it's a rite of passage from a historical, a traditional kind of view, that in some ways it's a rite of passage. I get that. But the actual reason, the meat and potatoes, the
real reason fighters do it,
the real motivating factor for coming to America and attempting to appeal to this market is money. And Bob Arum just said that himself. The real appeal of attempting to appeal to the American market is money. It's a fiscal issue. You know, you can tack on the other stuff, the outlying stuff like, you know, rite of passage. Other fighters have had to do it in the past. I get all of that. But the real reason that fighters do it is for money. This is essentially a conversation about finance, about economics. It's a fiscal issue. It's a fiscal issue more than it's an issue about a rite of passage. It's about money more than it's about anything else. Essentially, coming to America and attempting to appeal to this market is about money. But when you're seeing a guy like Manny Pacquiao and a guy like Adrian Broner, when all guys like that, who are very well known, these, you know, in a lot of ways, I mean, Broner's not a giant, but Manny's a giant in the sport of boxing. And all Manny did with this pay-per-view involving another well-known guy was 400,000 buys. That's not going to make this market seem very appealing when that's all Manny Pacquiao can do. Yet time and time again, when this conversation is rehatched, the fans, they tend to treat it like it's about a rite of passage. It's about money more than it's about a rite of passage. So when you're making the kind of money that Anthony Joshua's been making domestically, the American market seems less and less important to your overall success, your overall financial gain. It's there. The potential is always there. But a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. If I know that I'm guaranteed to make X amount of dollars sitting right where I am, and I don't know, but it's possible that I can go over there and maybe get that or a little more, I don't know this, but it's possible. The potential is there. Now, there are other guys over there that have been there longer than I have. I haven't even gone over there yet. But there are other guys over there, and they're not even making the money that I'm making sitting right here. The question then becomes, how rudimentary is it for Anthony Joshua to appeal to the American market when he's already making more money than 90% of the guys that are there? The one pay-per-view star that, you know, with the exception of Manny Pacquiao, but the one guy who was a young guy who's still in his prime, who was a pay-per-view star, he opted out of moving pay-per-views and chose to take a flat rate to fight on DAZN. We're talking about Canelo Alvarez. This is one of the few guys that's left that could have moved pay-per-views, and he's opted out of that for the guaranteed cash. All I'm communicating here, ladies and gentlemen, is this is not your mother and father's pay-per-view market. This is not your father's pay-per-view market.